I am Sujith Mangalathu. So I did my PhD at Georgia Tech with Reggie Daroche. Yesterday there was a discussion on my work at Georgia Tech. Professor Kunnath presented some of my work. One of ET student directed some of my work. At Georgia Tech, I was focused on generating fragility curve for the entire California bridge inventory. So I suggested fragility relationships for more than 24,000 bridges. So I used a machine learning technique there. So this work is an extension of my work at Georgia Tech. So here I am going to present the aftershock, seismic vulnerability, and time-dependent risk assessment of bridges. So at Georgia Tech, I didn't consider time as a factor in the risk assessment of bridges. So the motivation comes from the post-earthquake functionality and repair implications. So currently, Caltrans or Jesus or Shakers has 4 damage states, such as minor, moderate, extensive, and complete. And they have some qualitative descriptions associated with these damage states. So these descriptions are coming from the post-event traffic state of the bridge, or traffic operation implications, or emergency repair implications. However, time is not a factor in this chart. So after an earthquake, the inspectors will go and inspect the bridge, and based on the damage on the components such as column or bearing or abutments, they classify the bridge into minor, moderate, extensive, or complete. So that is good. That will give us a lot of information, the field observation of the bridge, and classifying the bridge into various damage states. But the extent to which the residual structural capacity and time-dependent aftershock hazard and risk on this bridge functionality is not clear. So the objective of this work is to conduct aftershock seismic vulnerability and time-dependent risk assessment of typical California bridge. So contrary to my study at Georgia Tech, here I am trying to generate a framework for the aftershock seismic vulnerability and time-dependent risk. So we can use these results to inform decisions regarding the timing of inspections and the closure of bridge. So this is the framework which we are envisioning. So we select some main shocks, and we damage the bridge to a specific state. For example, during the main shock, it is highly likely that the bridge is in one of the 4 damage states. So if the bridge is damaged in one of the 4 limit states, we apply some aftershocks, and we generate the aftershock fragility curve of the bridges. Once we have the aftershock fragility and the probability of occurrence of aftershock, we will generate the time-dependent hazard and risk. So this is a plot between the time and the probability that the bridge is staying in a limit state. I will explain this in the coming slides. So the final goal or the deliverable thing from this project is some time-dependent functionality and decision-making charts. So we can say for this much time the bridge should be in closure state, or what is the state of the bridge, whether it can allow emergency traffic or whether it can allow the public traffic after an earthquake. But this framework involves a lot of steps. So we have to select some main shock and aftershock ground motions. So we create some finite element model of the bridge in OpenSeas. Once we have the model and once we have the earthquake ground motions, we conduct some main shock and aftershock fragility analysis. After that, we quantify time-dependent hazard and risk using a Markovian chain framework. And finally, we establish the time-dependent risk and the functionality or inspection relationships. So the selection of ground motions. So the Jack Baker, as a part of the framework, selected some ground motions. But our focus is on selecting the main shock and aftershock records. So if we look at the past studies, there is some non-negligible difference in the frequency content between the main shock and aftershock. So we are trying to use the actual main shock and Aftershock from the NGA2 database. And since the bridge is already in a damaged state, we are planning to generate the fragility curve using a stripe approach. So the traditional fragility analysis of bridge is carried out using a cloud approach. So you apply some selected ground motions, you run the nonlinear time history analysis, and once you have the result of nonlinear time history analysis, you plot the demand and the intensity measure in a logarithmic space. Such a procedure is not good for aftershock because the relation between the demand and the intensity measure during aftershock doesn't follow a linear relationship. Sometimes it might not follow any relationship. So we are planning to generate the fragility curve using a stripe approach. So the selection of main shock and aftershock ground motion. So we are considering two cases here, one for a specific site and one for a scenario based. So the definition of main shock and aftershock is similar to the NGA West2 database, like a class 1 and class 2. So this is the range of magnitude of ground motions that is available in the NGA2. So based on my study at Georgia Tech, I found that the average period of highway bridges in California is close to 1 second. So based on epsilon criteria and based on the recorded ground motions in the NGA2 database, we are selecting the main shocks and aftershocks. So we selected 34 pairs of main shock and aftershock ground motions. This is how we are modeling the bridge. So we are trying to model the bridge in as detail as possible. We are not expecting any damage to the deck. So the deck is an elastic element. So for column modeling, we are using a fiber type displacement based beam column element. So for modeling the abutments, we are essentially using springs. For abutment, we are using a model suggested by Shamshabadi, and the pile modeling that is coming from the recommendations of Tom Shantz. And for bearing, we are using some experimental results to model the bearing. Pounding is a model developed by Darosh and his group some couple of years back. And shear key, shear key model, we are getting the model from some experimental results of Mangalathu. So this is the connection of the springs at the abutments. We are connecting bearing and pounding in parallel, and they are connecting in series with the abutment backfill. So we are trying to get the response of almost every component in the bridge. So this is some selected case study bridge for our study. So our focus is on highway bridges. So we are selecting a 2-span highway bridge with a single column and a multi-column bend. So these are coming from the plan review of bridges in California. So the details of this abutment modeling and the selection of bridges are presented in my thesis at Georgia Tech. So now we are going to the aftershock fragility. So if the bridge is damaged to a specific damage state, so aftershock fragility is the probability that the damage will exceed a specific level of damage given an aftershock intensity measure. So the bridge is inbuilt. So we are applying the main shock by scaling the main shock So we are targeting a specific damage state for the bridge. Once the bridge is damaged to a specific damage state, we apply aftershock and we generate the aftershock fragility of the bridges. So this is the aftershock fragility after damaging the bridge to a slight damage state. Since the bridge is already damaged and applying another aftershock will increase the seismic vulnerability of the bridges. So here the dotted lines corresponds to the fragility with only main shock, and the solid lines corresponds to the main shock plus aftershock fragility. Once we have aftershock fragility for all the damage states, we employed a Markovian framework to estimate the limit state transition probability. For example, what is the probability that the bridge stays in a specific limit state if the bridge is damaged to a slide? So with the time, the probability that the bridge stays in slide damage decreases because the bridge is already in the slide damage state. However, the probability that the bridge goes from slight to higher damage state increases with the time. This is because there is a high probability of aftershock after a main shock event. So if there is a main shock that is coming, if there is an aftershock that is coming after the main shock, the probability that the bridge stays in a specific limit state increases. So here we are showing the curve for the bridge that is damaged to a moderate damage state, and what is the probability that the bridge will stay in that extensive, the bridge will go to the extensive or complete damage state with time. So the ongoing research direction is we are doing some aftershock seismic hazard analysis to quantify the time-dependent risk. So whether the scaling of main shock has an influence on the aftershock fragility. So we are doing some investigations there. So we are implementing the Markov chain that integrates the hazard curve and main shock damage-dependent fragility to quantify the time-dependent risk. So with these results, we are planning to propose some charts that can be used by the Caltrans or Jesus to make time-dependent risk outcomes to inform the bridge functionality and inspection priority. Thank you. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have.
We have plenty of time for questions. Comments, questions, suggestions.
Did you do the soil at all?
Yes. So which soil? Foundation soil or abutment soil?
Yeah.
Which one? Yeah, we considered both.
You consider to do a suite of springs.
Okay. Yes.
So what happens to one spring is not affected by what happens to the other. And can you make that bigger?
Yes. Okay. Okay. So what is your question? Yeah.
So your input motion goes into where?
The input motion goes to whichever nodes that is fixed in OpenSys.
Is what?
Whichever nodes that fixed. So if the foundation is fixed, yeah, the foundation is, yeah.
It's the same motion that goes before goes,
Yes.
So I imagine one level more that you can go into is to add to this model the presence of the soil layers. Because you may have in one end that you may have a little pile of soil, so it's softer on one end.
No, soil at abutments or soil at foundation? Which one you are saying? Soil layer at the abutment or soil layer at the foundation? But the abutment backfill, they have the same soil, right?
But the abutment soil then continues down because the soil, that abutment soil is usually a backfill granular material.
Yeah.
Continues below with the natural soil conditions. And the natural soil conditions where you have your piles.
Yeah, that makes life more complicated.
You may have a soft material there.
But the real issue here is that for the vast majority of bridges, the real failure mechanisms and damage states is really all out of the column. And the soil springs and everything else in this is really just designed to kind of have the right loading for that.
And we are.
Absolutely. And you could definitely go that route and make it expand the damage mechanisms into more soil-related things.
And the foundation is very stiff. So basically, we are modeling the foundation as a linear element.
So what I am concerned is that you have the abutments and the soil and everything. And one part of the soil moves in such a way that is affecting what happens in the pile that is 200 meters on the other end. So the demand on your columns, not in the foundation, your demand on the columns are not what you would expect to happen. So that's it.
Yeah.
What Pedro is asking you is the foundation input motion that is different at the level of the pile shaft than at the abutments. And Marcus has transfer functions to alter the foundation and motion of the pile. But then OpenSeas does not have capability to differentiate the motion.
No.
Yeah, that's a possible line of complicated expansion. Yeah, we'll try.
You can do multi-support excitation.
Yeah, now we have the capability to do multi-support excitation in OpenSeas.
Yeah, there's a paper by Marcus and Jack Zhang
Yeah,
who has that transfer function.
yeah. But yeah, in this research we didn't use that. We will try to incorporate that.
And this is 3D, no? Or is
Yes, it's 3D.
so you have also.
Yeah, but the bridge is symmetric, so there might not be much torsion.
So your bridge model is that's it. So you are not working more in refining your bridge model.
This bridge model is validated with the Caltrans. So we have the component level validation, system level validation, and the fragility validation. So we are not going to improve the bridge model as a part of this project. But what we are planning to do is to suggest a framework for the aftershock.
Maybe if that goes so swimmingly as this just did, it might be nice to understand how, if you weren't symmetric, how that might help if you had one longer span, one just by really moving your column, your central support one model to the right, you do that just to compare it. Or I know there was a question previously about an abutment that's not linear. Because you can follow the same exact methodology and just compare and now you can just see apples to apples, what really changed in something greater and something further understood.
Yeah, that is the same problem with the skewed bridge. So the torsion comes into picture.
Correct. Once you get this down the way you're describing it, to do the aftershocks with after the main shock, then now you can start having fun and playing with using that as your baseline and just changing one variable in terms of now it's asymmetric and then kind of compare it. Now you have an abutment that's not linear. I'm sorry, or a span that's not linear in terms of a line that's curved. And you can play a lot of games now and really validate what you've done. Just an idea.
Yeah.
You could ignore everything I'm saying too.
Yeah, so yes, we at Georgia Tech I did some curved bridges, so we have that kind of issue. But the model is capable of doing that. Yeah, but our focus here is kind of different.
So that's you're only focusing on this type of bridge.
Because most of the 40% of the California bridges are of two span, and our focus is because it's only a 1 year project. So
You're very discreet tasks you're trying to take care of, and it seems like you got it relatively under control.
Well, I mean, if people think this study is worthwhile, next year there could be more types of bridges to look at, and
You can extrapolate from here, but once we get this one perfect, then pull it close to the game.
but as he said, I mean, that's just very few studies that have looked at something for aftershock after the main shock.
and time dependent risk. So
Any other comments, questions? He will not be here. He's going
Yeah.
to the airport.
yeah, that is why I cut short my presentation.
Don't leave any questions to the open discussion. Please leave.
The aftershock thing is a very important. Because we have our bridges survive earthquakes. Either if it is an aftershock now or in 2 years, it's an aftershock too. And the soil has already been, or the structures have been already subject.
So I guess most of the questions were for the structure model, but how about the selection of the aftershock? Any comments?
Yes.
On that? Because there could be also a variety of these things.
Yeah, there is no
Are
magic.
they doing the right thing? Was there planning or any feedback from NISA? You have done, you are a ground motion
There is a
person?
recent study by Gandoni at UIUC about stochastic model for simulation of mini-shock aftershock pairs. I don't know if you're using this as input.
Yeah,
Have you seen his work at UIUC?
No, not yet, yeah.
The time between different aftershocks. What we were looking at.
Yeah.
Worth looking at.
Yes, yeah, we will.
I didn't know he looked at the time before the range.
Yeah, it's a recent paper where they modeled the correlation between the main shock and aftershock motion parameters and looked at the time.
Paolo Gardoni never stopped shocking me. He always finds new topics to work on. Anyway, yeah, I mean, maybe that's a good feedback.
Yes, yeah.
Since your focus is in the selection of these time series, so it would be good to see what others are doing, at least for simulation side. Last chance for any feedback for him? No? So Frank, multi-support excitation in open seas work, right? Yeah. You weren't here when that was mentioned. We can do multi-support excitation. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.